Alright, so last year we got our latest, and I'm gonna presume final Hunger Games film.
Yo, that is a sick joke. Like they waited to announce that the moment that I decided to upload this video. Thanks, Lionsgate.
The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, last year, I had a lot of YouTube videos that I had to do reviews on, but I couldn't make rankings for all the movies that came out. So this year, I vowed to catch up and give you a bunch of rankings on movies that I reviewed, but did not give rankings after today's Hunger Games. This video was chosen by a poll I put up on YouTube. It was either between this or sharing my most unpopular opinions. My most unpopular opinions will be a video either coming next week or the week after. That depends on when I upload this one. But for right now, we're going to rank the Hunger Games movies. Let's go. Alright, so you gotta know my my introduction to the Hunger Games. When I was probably 12 or 13, my parents had me read the books. I always read one. I always thought one was a pretty good book, but I could never get into two. I could never get into the rest of the books. And so I never fully finished the series. I never read all the movies. And then for the movies, I watched the first movie a long time ago, wasn't a fan of it, and never watched the rest of them. So when The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, I planned on going to go see that movie, and I talked to my friends, and specifically my friend's mom, who's a Hunger Games fan, and she said, yeah, you gotta watch all the other movies before watching this one. I was like, sure. And once I watched them, I'm a dystopian fan, and I finally grew to love them. I really like this movie franchise. It's another controversial ranking. So many of my rankings are controversial, so if you don't agree with opinion, share yours down below, and please don't be hateful or disagree with mine all that much. It's just my opinion. I want to know yours down below. And while you're down there, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, and so you never miss another video. And with that said, let's finally get started. That was a long intro with number 5, and I'm going with The Hunger Games: Catching Fire. To be completely honest, this movie was one that I was looking forward to because I really did like the first movie on rewatch. And when it's expanding off that first movie, when it's about these characters, Peeta and Katniss, and what happened after they defied the government, what is actually going on with the districts and the government and the capital and everything that they're trying to plan here, it is really compelling and had some really cool moments in here, especially when Katniss's designer just gets brutally murdered out of nowhere. There are so many cool sequences like that inside this entire movie. And then we get to the actual Hunger Games stuff at the end of the film. And while the movie was so cool, it's explored all of the stuff that happened after the first Hunger Games. The back half of the movie was more Hunger Games stuff, but didn't have the emotional weight like the first Hunger Games movie did. You've been in here before. You've seen the Hunger Games happen before. And so when we get the Hunger Games in the back half of the movie, it's just like big blockbuster stuff. And it's not as emotional or entertaining as was in the first movie. It's just there. And so while it was so interesting to explore, a bug just flew in front of my face and scared the living crap out of me. While it was fun to explore this world and see what actually is going on and what happened after the defiance in the first movie, and while it is artificially entertaining in the back half of the movie, seeing them doing the Hunger Games, this movie is pretty clearly the weakest in my opinion. But I do like this franchise, and I don't think there's necessarily a bad movie inside of this franchise. In 4th place, we're going with The Hunger Games: Mockingjay Part 1. And this is a movie that has a tough task of having to set up everything for the finale, which you'll see where it's at later on. So it has a task of setting everything up for the finale, but also can't really spoil or give anything away in that finale. Easily, I do think that these two parts could have merged into one, except part 2 is even more epic. I feel like part 1 was necessary because we had to explore Katniss and her trying to build the army to go against and fight in the war, and that was an important part of this story, and it's an important part in the movie. But because we spend so much time in that aspect, we don't spend a lot of time on any of the payoff or anything that you really want to see. A lot of the movie is her just going from place to place trying to recruit people, and while it's a necessary part in this franchise, while there were still some really great parts in here, seeing all our characters gear up for the war that is coming, seeing Peeta and how he is now, there were also aspects inside this movie that I do think could have definitely been shaved out and were kind of just a little boring at some parts and didn't really have any of the payoff. So while there were some very solid parts within this movie, and it sets up for a, in my opinion, incredible second part, that's all it is. It's the setup. We don't get any of the conclusion of it. So by law, it kind of has to be low down here. In third place, I'm going with the most recent one, The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I really enjoy this movie. I think it's really good. I was really surprised when I left the theater because this movie and the trailers I didn't think really looked good whatsoever. I was not looking forward to watching this movie, and when I finally watched it, the big takeaway from this film is that it really is have the best Hunger Games stuff. The Hunger Games action and the games in here are really, really great. When we're with these characters and they're fighting to the death, it's really cool because this is one of the first Hunger Games. You're in here and it's an enclosed area, so it's kind of like a claustrophobic thriller. He's not like this big woods, and if you run into each other, oh, good luck, you're dead. It's where people are just dying left and right, and it's a crucial fight for survival, and the action is absolutely awesome, and it's just the best stuff that we have in the Hunger Games movies because it's just so claustrophobic and pretty awesome. I do like how we're exploring President Snow and how he became a villain and all that. I do think that this is a very solid movie, but I do think that this movie particularly should have been split into two parts because the movie it kind of gets weird in the back half because it feels like we're almost done. We got about 20 to 30 minutes left in this movie. And we're taking a whole nother hour, and we're exploring things like how the love between Lucy and Snow goes wrong, and how Snow became the actual warlord evil guy that he is in the real movies. And so it just has all these themes here, but we can only spend so much time on that because we spent the first hour and a half of the movie focused on the Hunger Games. And when we shy away from the Hunger Games, the movie can get a little wonky. There are some great things that happen there, so there are some interesting ideas, but nothing is able to get fleshed out too much to where there's anything that really stood out. And for better or worse, I really liked this movie, specifically the first hour and a half, and then the last, I'd say, hour of it kind of just got a little bit wonky and really weird. I think if they split it into two parts, it would have fixed that out much better. Overall, though, still really enjoyed Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and really loved the Hunger Games aspect of the movie. In second place, and this is a huge gap up from the other three on this list, those movies I think are pretty good, specifically the Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That's a specific personal favorite of mine, but I don't think it's as good as these top two. Number two, The Hunger Games, the original Hunger Games, and again, that leaves a hot take at number one, but I don't care. The original Hunger Games is able to be just so unique because, like Catching Fire, where I mentioned that the action stuff is superficially fun, more of the blockbuster stuff, this one's able to have the action, but also feel personal. It feels personal for our characters because you feel the death. Like, you're put right in this movie. When I first watched this movie, when doing this rewatch for the new movie, I watched the movie, and the moment that they call out Primrose's name, I felt that instantly in the shoes of Katniss Everdeen. And when she has to call out the name, you feel the fear on everybody in the district and everybody in her family, because you feel that she's about to go through something so very dangerous and so very scary, and you 100% feel that. You feel the fear, and when you get into the Hunger Games, every death you feel is personal, because it's not just a big blockbuster, it's a fight for survival. And while it might not be as entertaining as it was in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I do think it's just so creepy because his capital is doing such bad things that you, as Katniss Everdeen, you feel her and you feel the fear that she has and you feel the emotions, especially when her friend that she makes in the Hunger Games, I can't remember her name, but when we meet her and she dies, you feel that because it's effortlessly full of emotion. And it's just so good when it comes to that because you feel the fear, you feel the disparity, you feel everything. And that's what makes this franchise so powerful, because you feel the terrible things the Capitol's doing. And by the time when we get to part 2 of Mockingjay, which is my number 1, by the way, we feel as you defeat the Capitol, and it feels like just such a huge success. And now let's move on to talking about my number 1, which is Mockingjay Part 2. Now, this might be because I'm a sucker for blockbusters. It's not as personal as it was with Hunger Games 1. While there's some personal moments, it's not as personal. It's more blockbustery. There's some big action sequences. But this is exactly what I describe as a summer blockbuster, a perfect summer blockbuster. Because I can just imagine going to sit in the theater, you have these big, wild action sequences in the movie, and then as it's closing out this franchise that you care for these characters so much, and you get the losses, the death, the despair, you feel all of that, and it is awesome. This movie is awesome because you get so many awesome action pieces, and then you get little personal moments where this is a war. So when Primrose dies, you feel that because you're in the middle of a war. And as Katniss, as the leader of this war, you can't just stop to mourn your sister. You can't just stop everything. You got to keep moving on. But then when you get to the scene in the house and you feel her just completely flip out, it's emotion. It's full of emotion. Like, man, I was blown away by that sequence. I thought it was so sad. I was almost at tears because you spent these 4 movies with these characters and then they die because of the war and because of how bad the Capitol is, and makes it so good. It's just a big blockbuster with personal moments. It is really, really a great movie, and I just can't believe that so many people don't like this movie. Because I thought not only as a blockbuster, it has great action sequences and is everything I wanted from the movie, but it had those little personal moments in this war that were just really emotionful. And I just loved this movie. And it's got to go in number 1. So that was my ranking of the Hunger Games movies. What's yours? Share it down below in the comment section. So stay tuned. My next video will probably be a ranking of the month of May. That said, subscribe and join the Nerd Army. Peace out.